we figure out hybrid. Oop. Let me mute my self there. Okay. We good to go? We're good? Okay. Welcome everyone to the 43rd July general meeting, our first hybrid meeting ever. So thank you in advance for your patience as we figure out how to create a space for people who wanted to get together in person while still supporting our members who can only make it online. This is the first in-person general meeting for the 43rd in 5 years, so we're really excited. And thank you for making time on your Tuesday, on this beautiful Tuesday, to come out with us. We're going to start with our land acknowledgement. While we're doing this, also in the chat for all of our online people, all of our online participants, Frederic in the chat has thrown the credentialing link. If you can please credential yourself using that voting code that was sent out. All of our in-person members, they all got credentialed as they came in. So thank you all if you were a member for checking in at that front desk so we can make sure that we have quorum. Tonight we meet both virtually and in person on the traditional lands of the First People of Seattle, the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the sacred relationship these communities hold with the land, the water, and all living beings. We recognize the disproportionate impacts that Indigenous communities have suffered, systematic injustices rooted in colonization that have caused Indigenous people to face erasure, racism, inadequate housing, generational poverty, police violence, and more. In acknowledging this, we recognize that the state has often failed to uphold its responsibilities to Indigenous people and that restitution must be more than words. It requires actionable commitments. This is more than just an acknowledgement, it's a call to action. And as a first step, we call on all participants to learn more about the past and present of the Indigenous communities, of the communities on whose lands we occupy. You can donate to Real Rent Duwamish, which is something that the 43rd does every month, and also we encourage you to sign their petition as they are fighting for their federal recognition. With that, we will move on to approval of our agenda, assuming that we have quorum. So we have quorum, excellent. I would entertain a motion by unanimous consent to approve the agenda for this evening. So moved by Derek. Do I have a second? Seconded, excellent. Are there any opposed to approving the agenda by unanimous consent? Any opposed? Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Thank you all. Next, we'll put our, I would entertain a motion to approve our minutes for the June 2025 meeting by unanimous consent. For people who are online, you will see the link in the chat. For all of our wonderful members, you got emailed those minutes about a week ago. I would entertain a motion. So moved. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any opposed? Any opposed? Any opposed? Excellent. The minutes are approved, and hopefully that will be the only voting we need to do tonight. So for those of you who are new and maybe might not be 43rd members, welcome. My name is Ryan Driscoll. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the chair of the 43rd. The 43rd District Democrats is a volunteer organization working to connect Democrats in Washington's 43rd Legislative District with elected officials, grassroots organizations, and effective advocacy for our party. We host a monthly general meeting like this, as well as a monthly social, and our goal is to keep up to speed on politics, them get involved. Quick announcements before into our program. First, we about a month and a half ago, we passed a resolution in support of the crisis care levy location on Broadway. At this point, we have almost 300 people who have signed on to that letter, which is by far the most effective advocacy action we've had since we started doing these this year. So a huge shout out and thank you to everyone who followed through on sending that in. And if you have not done that yet, yes. And if you haven't done it yet, and maybe you're new, you can sign up for our email lists and you will keep getting an email from me every Sunday that'll have it in it for the next couple of weeks. So we encourage you to sign in and show your support for that levy location. Next up, we had a question that came in, which I loved, which is how is the 43rd going to be supporting candidates that have been endorsed by the legislative district, which is a wonderful question. So Every Wednesday, you will receive an email from us that has canvassing opportunities to go out and support our candidates. We have 2 of them coming up that are being co-hosted by the 43rd. So on both July 20th and July 26th, we will be co-hosting a canvas with both Erica Evans and Dion Foster to go get out the vote for them. And so if you are available and can show up, please come. If you have never canvassed before, that is totally okay. We will teach you how to do it. We'll send you out with a partner. It's a great way to go and knock on doors, see some of our beautiful community, meet people, and encourage them to make sure that they get their ballots in. In addition, you probably noticed as you came in that we have these beautiful little posters with many of our endorsed candidates. Please feel free to take these. You can use them to go canvassing. You can use them to put up around any place that you think they won't get taken down. So take them, use them. They are there for you to use. We will be doing some postering around our district with these as well as getting them out to some of our PCOs so that they can hand these out. So that's another tool that you can use. And as you probably know, ballots are going to be coming out on Thursday. So everyone keep an eye out for those. And they are due on August 5th. If you're on our mailing list, you'll get a couple of reminders about that from us. But we encourage you to fill those in as early as possible so that they don't accidentally get lost somewhere or you forget about them, and get those in. You'll also get an email from me on Friday that has lots of useful links to help you, including a link to all of our endorsements, as well as your ballot drop boxes locations. We are not going to have any August meeting. Generally in August, we take the month off. We instead do a barbecue for anyone who would like to come. So we'll have an announcement for that, and with the RSVP coming out soon. It's going to be on August 23rd in Belltown. And we're looking forward to just having a great opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more, have some great conversations. We'll have a couple elected officials showing up. So great opportunity to have a slightly more social experience of engaging with local progressive people. And then finally, in the lobby, you probably noticed there are a couple of QR codes. So this event is free to everyone who attends, but it wasn't free for us to put it on. So if you can donate $5 or $10, you'll see the QR code later as well. We would encourage you to do so just so that we can continue to make these events free for everyone. If you can't, no worries about it. But if you can, we'd appreciate it so that we can continue to host events like this, which are a little bit more expensive than doing everything on Zoom. Okay, you all didn't come here to listen to me give announcements. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our State Attorney General, Nick Brown. I'll let you. Okay. Hi.
Good evening. First of all, let me just thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak for a little bit. And I was given a few questions to answer as well, so I'm happy to try to get to those. But it's a pleasure to be with you, and it's good to see people back together in person. For those that don't know me, I'm the 19th Attorney General of the state of Washington, was elected in November, and today is my 6-month anniversary in office. I will confess it feels slightly longer than 6 months. And there's obviously been a great deal of work happening in this agency. And so let me just touch on a few things. And, I really have loved the work thus far. It feels an honor to be in this position where we get to have such a huge impact on all of the people of the state of Washington, and indeed increasingly the people of this country. And for people that don't know, the Attorney General's office in Washington is the second largest law firm on the West Coast, second only to the Attorney General's office in California. I have approximately 834 lawyers that work for me on your behalf, and another over 900 staff members, legal assistants, paralegals, policy analysts, legislative folks, outreach people, communications, and I feel really honored to be part of this law firm that is doing such incredible work. And we have 2 principal roles. One, we are the lawyers for all of state government. So every agency, board, and commission is represented by law by the Attorney General's office. But principally, we are the lawyer for the people of the state of Washington, which means that I get to advocate on your behalf on a host of issues that I think are really impacting people in this state, whether it's healthcare, education, environmental issues. And every now and then we sue the president of the United States. We, I appreciate the applause for it because I just know how much work has gone into defending people in this state and defending your interest. But frankly, it's a little bit sad to me that so much of my work is framed upon defending Americans from their president. But that is the reality of the moment that we are in. This week, we filed our 27th lawsuit against the Trump administration. And we have tackled things impacting your civil rights and impacting money and just trying to make sure and do everything that we can to defend the rule of law and protect interest here in Washington. For a little bit of context, the coalition of Democratic attorney generals in the country have collectively filed, I think, about 35 lawsuits. So I have not chosen to join every single lawsuit that one of my Democratic colleagues has filed. Usually it's simply an analysis of both the merits of the case and the impact to Washington. And so I have decided differently on a handful of cases. On the other end of the spectrum, at this point in 2017, during the first Trump administration, I think the state of Washington had joined or filed about 3 lawsuits. And so the fact that we're on number 27 is a reflection of both, one, we were really prepared for this moment, not only Washington, but many states across the country. But more importantly, the breadth and scope of illegal, unconstitutional, and downright bigoted and hateful actions by this president is exponentially higher than it was in 2017, at least at this point in the year. But I've been really proud to be engaged in this work. We filed the very first lawsuit challenging the first executive order, one of the first executive orders from the president, attempting to rewrite the Constitution around birthright citizenship. And then we filed cases protecting healthcare for transgender people. We have filed cases protecting funding to the state of Washington when it comes to health funding, education funding, federal employment, all sorts of issues. And we have successfully intervened in the vast majority of those cases where we've been able to convince a court to get immediate relief for the state. But we have not prevailed in every one of those cases. And increasingly, we are facing real challenges from our courts, including the Supreme Court, that is operating on what they call the shadow docket or the emergency docket, and stopping what we have viewed as appropriate injunctive relief or temporary relief from our courts. So we will continue to do this work, but we have, I think, our work cut out for us. But I frankly cannot imagine being in a different position right now, because it does feel like the work that's happening in our office is having an impact on people. And, we do so many things as an agency that you never read about and you'll never see the headlines about. And, I work with a really dedicated group of public servants who are grinding away on behalf of their home state. And I just see the work that they do every day, and I really value that work. And at this point in our country where public employment in particular is derided and ostracized and criticized, I always want to lift up the people that work for me, but on your behalf, because I know how hard they're working in work that they have chosen to do when they could be doing something for more money and less grief. So I'm really proud to be in position with so many dedicated public servants. We have a lot of challenges coming up. We're at case number 27. I would be surprised if we're not over 30 within a week, because of all the unconstitutional actions that we are seeing coming from the administration. Our work is not only led by our office, but one of the other big differences between this time and last time is there's a lot more collaboration with my fellow Democratic states or in the District of Columbia. We are working really collaboratively with them. I have multiple meetings a week with my colleagues as we try to divide and conquer some of this work. Many of our cases are led by Washington. I think of our 27 cases, we are leading or co-leading in 8 or 9 of them at this point. But there are other issues where other Democratic AGs have led because they, are more directly touched by an issue, they've done more research on an issue, or for whatever reason, it feels more appropriate for other states to take a lead, which is great because we could simply not lead every single case. And we will continue to do this work as long as these challenges are presenting to the public here in Washington. But there's also all this work that it does impact your life. And, I really am proud of the work that doesn't get the headlines. Of the 800 and plus lawyers that I have, there's probably about 30 who are working on some of this affirmative work involving the Trump administration, which means the vast majority of the work that I do and that my staff does has nothing to do with Donald Trump. But he presents a very unique challenge, to put it mildly. And I get asked quite often about whether or not we're in a constitutional crisis or not. And I certainly understand the reason for that question, but I think it's fairly academic. I think we are in a crisis, no matter what you call it, because what we're seeing is just a real undermining of the rule of law, of institutions, of norms that are going to last well beyond these next 3.5 years. And, I'm really focused on not only confronting that challenge now, but thinking about what are the things that we need to do as an AG's office, as a state, as a community, as friends and neighbors, to not only survive this moment, but survive the coming years beyond these next 3.5 years. So there's a lot on our plate, but I'm really proud to be in this position. And, I think that the work that you all do, gathering and building community and helping me and my agency identify where your concerns are, is really important. So that's part of the reason I wanted to be here and talk for a few minutes. And I've got a few questions that were given to me by Ryan, and if there are more, I'm happy to do those as well. First one is, will the AGs from blue states be responding to the current actions to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education? Yes. And we've got some good news and some less good news. So we have filed 2 cases challenging some of the illegal cuts to the Department of Education. The first one we filed was about the firings of about half of the total employees of the Department of Education. When you fire half the people in a public agency, they're not going to do the same amount of work, and which meant less funding and support for educational programs and ultimately students and children here in Washington. We filed that case. We got a preliminary injunction, and then just what is today? Tuesday. Yesterday, on Monday, the Supreme Court issued an emergency staying that injunction, essentially allowing the Trump administration to continue its plan of attack to dismantle the Department of Education. The case itself will still proceed on the merits, and so at least in theory, we could prevail down the line, but so much damage is going to be done in the next months before that case is resolved. So I'm really, really frustrated by what the Supreme Court did. There's nothing you can do once the Supreme Court acts, at least on that particular case. But it's going to have a real harmful impact here on Washington. And, both my agency and the governor's office and the legislature is going to have to think about and analyze and figure out, what, if anything, can the state do to fill some of those voids. We filed another case just in the last few days challenging the president's illegal cuts through the Department of Education to funding the various school districts here in Washington. Every state is impacted a little bit differently because of our funding cycle, but essentially Washington school districts, like many school districts in the country, were due on July 1st to get an influx of money approved by the Department of Education. And on June 30th, the Trump administration gave notice that they were reviewing that and then withheld that funding. It's about $130 million to Washington school districts. So we filed suit along with most of my Democratic colleagues to challenge that and hope that we prevail in ensuring that funding comes to Washington school districts ultimately. When you cut $130 million from school districts in Washington, the people that suffer are first and foremost the children who are impacted there, the services they get, the language access, food services, all sorts of things. But there are so many downstream, immediate, and long-term effects to cuts like that. Second question, how will we put community members first against the Trump administration when state agencies are co-conspiring? I don't want to fully guess what this question is getting at, but I think there are valid concerns, and there was a story that came out just a couple days ago about some potential record disclosures by the Department of Licensing to the Trump administration. I really cannot get into that specific situation because I represent them as a state client. I will just say that my team is working really closely with the governor's office and the Department of Licensing to figure out what is true and not true about that story and figure out what, if any, laws are violated. And that's probably all I can say about that particular story. Do you think nudity is protected expression under the state constitution? And would you intervene to protect the historically queer nude beach? That's the first time I've gotten such a question. Well, let me separate the specific issue to the general question. Nudity certainly can be protected expression. And, if you live in Seattle long enough, there's lots of public nudity. I was at the solstice parade not too long ago, and so that's fresh in my mind. I don't want to say too much about what's happening. I saw the initial court ruling about the beach. That's been a safe space for LGBTQ individuals for years. And at least, putting the law aside, it just seems like you got an angry rich person who's trying to undermine this really safe space. And that is a sad testament, whether or not it's legal or not. And we need more safe spaces for vulnerable communities. And, I think the most personally impactful case that I've brought this year was our lawsuit challenging the cuts to transgender healthcare that happened with the Trump administration. And, I say that every case that we do, I think, is valid and meritorious and in the public's interest. But for me, that case was really about the health and safety and life or death issues for children. And to see that the children and their parents and their healthcare providers and doctors stood up and put their stories on the line to support our lawsuit was super impactful. And so it's important that we continue to advocate for people who don't have as strong as voices. And so I'm very mindful of the particular vulnerability and need for safe places for the LGBTQI community. But I probably shouldn't speak more about that specific lawsuit. Yeah.
So we've got one more question from one of our members online. What affirmative actions will the state be taking to protect the public from civil and constitutional right violations by federal agents? And do you support city councils directing police departments to arrest any unidentified person who detains or kidnaps another person?
Sorry. So my job as the Attorney General is to protect and defend Washington state law and constitution and the federal constitution. And I do that whether or not I agree with the law or not. I think that's my oath of office, and I don't necessarily get to pick and choose what my friends in the legislature pass or what the people pass through initiative. But one of the most important protections that Washington state has around unlawful or improper federal enforcement or around immigration is the Keep Washington Working Act. This law was passed in 2019 by the legislature that provides pretty clear limitations on not only law enforcement, but other entities in terms of how they cooperate on federal civil immigration enforcement issues. So it prescribes, it limits local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE and Homeland Security on a host of different issues. And my office is charged with developing model policies for law enforcement and then enforcing that law. And for the most part, that has been a productive, collaborative relationship with local law enforcement agencies. And when we have identified issues where they haven't been in compliance, we've helped them get into compliance. But in at least one case that has not been productive. And so earlier this year, I sued the Adams County Sheriff and Adams County for failure to follow Washington state law because they were explicitly and blatantly cooperating with ICE to do civil immigration enforcement in violation of state law. We had tried to work collaboratively with them after the election of Trump again. They hired Stephen Miller's law firm to represent them, and so our collaboration was done. But what we're seeing right now, I mean, obviously, multiple administrations have done immigration enforcement, right? Biden and Obama both did immigration enforcement and deported a lot of people. What we're seeing right now is a whole different level of immigration enforcement because it is disregarding people's basic rights and humanity, and I think is done explicitly to create fear in undocumented communities and frankly larger communities beyond that as well. And the literal kidnapping of people off the streets and targeting students for expressing their First Amendment rights of expression, from arresting people who are going to their appointments at immigration facilities to go through the lawful process. The tactics being used are really inhumane and disgraceful. And at least in the last month, we've seen a real increase in, getting to the heart of the question of ICE or people who are claiming to be ICE targeting people without any identification, fully masked, and it's creating not only fear in those people, but a really unsafe environment for everyone in the community. And there are limitations about what I can do as Attorney General. I cannot dictate or mandate that ICE wear certain uniforms or have certain tactics. I can only enforce state law and otherwise advocate for a change in policy. So we joined some advocacy efforts last week to support a bill by Senator Murray and other bills that would limit ICE's ability to use such tactics. But it is really important that we continue to learn and hear about these issues because I do think that they could cross the line into violating other state laws that might give us some enforcement authority. But there's nothing that I can do, at least that I have thought of or my team has thought of, to stop ICE from some of the tactics that they've been using. But we were very, very mindful of some of that work and how it is impacting the community. And if we have an opportunity to bring cases or to otherwise stop that behavior, we'll do it. Anything else? Thank you again for letting me crash, and I'm glad you guys are back in person. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. One more time for State Attorney General Nick Brown. Thank you for taking the time to come. Okay, next up, I have to put my podcasting voice on. She's editor of Publicola, Erica Barnett. He's political consultant, Sandeep Kaushik. And of course, they're led by former KUOW political reporter and podcaster, David Hyde. Let's give it up for the Seattle Nice podcast crew.
So good.
Led by, wow. All right, well, we'll discuss that perhaps in the course of this podcast. So I have been tasked with giving a few little ground rules and telling you what we're doing here. Hello. So we are recording a podcast. And so that means that we might stop from time to time and just kind of pause and say something to somebody named Jenny. Jenny is our editor. She is up there, I believe.
Look at your microphone.
Got a droopy microphone, you guys. So we're going to be recording. So please be quiet during the recording, except for now, when I want everybody to applaud when we say 43rd District Democrats. Are we saying this in unison? All right, I'll take charge. 43rd District Democrats. All right. Let's see if we can do just a little bit better. We're going to do it one more time. 43rd District Democrats. All right.
Rousing cheating.
So whenever we say that during the podcast, go ahead, do it. That's what we're hoping. Everybody ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
By the way, that was a great rendition.
Should I turn on my voice memos?
Yeah. All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Seattle Nice. I'm David Hyde with Erica C. Barnett of Publicola. So nice to see you in person, Erica.
Nice to see you in person too. I hope you'll be a little nicer to me.
All right, we'll see.
Keeping with the name of the podcast.
After that, maybe not. All right. Also with us, Seattle's answer, I was going to say to Hunter S. Thompson, but let's go with Seattle's reincarnation of David Gergen, Sandeep Kaushik.
Yeah. Too soon.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Yeah. All right. And also our hosts for this live taping of the podcast, the 43rd District Democrats. The 43rd District Democrats are a volunteer organization that advocates for the Democratic Party. They also make endorsements, including in the upcoming August primary. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Ballots go out this week. So first question, we're jumping right in. Back in 2021, you two, a lot of Seattle voters said homelessness was a top concern. Many also said public safety, and public safety continued to be a big issue in 2023. And a lot of progressives lost. In fact, a lot of people that the 43rd District Democrats endorsed lost in both of those elections. But that was then.
Wonder why. Yeah.
This is now. Erica, what do you think the top issues are this year for voters and why?
Yeah, well, I think that public safety continues to be a top issue. But I mean, from what I hear the most about, it's cost of living and cost of housing. That is what people, I think, are thinking about right now. It's what they're talking about. I mean, it's not just, the fact that the rent's too damn high. 60% of people in Seattle are renters, as we've discussed many times. But it's also just everything is getting so goddamn expensive. In Seattle, we're talking about another sales tax increase. And I think that is really, I mean, it's the economy stupid at a local level right now. I mean, even more than all these related issues like homelessness, like public safety and fentanyl, which I'm guessing Sandeep's going to talk about.
Well, no, first of all, I'm gonna, I think generally agree with you here. The chamber did their kind of every biannual, is it biannual, semi-annual, every 6 months poll that they released back in April, and they had homelessness as the top issue, but fairly closely followed by essentially about at the same place, crime and drug stuff, as well as affordability, right? But I will say this, I saw some more recent polling than that, where Erica, to your point, I do think like affordability has kind of risen to the top. Crime is clearly not having the same level of intensity and impact as it was even a couple of years ago. First of all, because crime is down, I think, in Seattle, whereas a couple of years ago it was rising. I also think that the left has, moderated a bit from, cloud cuckoo town that it went to on sort of the abolitionist defund stuff that we were seeing from kind of left lane candidates before. So that's taken some of the intensity out of the backlash on that sort of stuff. So, but I do think, yeah, I think affordability is sort of top of mind for people now. I see it in the polling. I hear it from folks. I think we saw it in the New York City mayor's race, right? Where Mamdani's focus on affordability concerns really helped him running as a Democratic socialist and getting a big surprise win in that race. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, right. Last time crime, this time maybe unaffordability. That was huge in the New York City mayor's race, where a socialist just won their Democratic primary. But with Erica, he also talked about progressive taxes, which is something we're hearing from the progressive candidates this time, more so than the moderate candidates. But Mamdani in that race was also bringing up fresh new ideas to go with those taxes. So what do you think? What do you think's happening now in terms of fresh new ideas?
I mean, does Seattle ever really come up with fresh new ideas? I feel like we just kind of recycle the same old ideas over and over again, hence why we're doing yet another sales tax. But I would also say that, crime being the top issue last time, I think that's kind of a ginned up kind of issue almost all the time, because crime rates go up, they go down. They are slightly down now. I don't know that, the perception of crime is something that exists completely independent of like the media saying that everything is dangerous and politicians saying everything is dangerous and political consultants saying that everything is dangerous because we defunded the police, which we didn't do. So I think all of these, you can't look at issues in a vacuum, but with affordability, people sure know if they can afford groceries. They know if they can afford their rent. So I think that's one of those issues that is like always going to hit much closer to home than some of these other issues like crime, like fentanyl.
Sandeep, you've hypnotized the population with your talk about crime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's not rehash like
Every other episode
yeah,
we've ever done.
every other episode of Seattle Vibes. I will say this, David, I actually do think, look, there's the individual issues, there's affordability, crime, homelessness, whatever, those are clearly the top three. But more than that, I think what I've seen in some you know, I saw some of the results of some recent focus groups with Seattle voters, and there is, I think, a real kind of across the board frustration about lack of bold or direct action on kind of anything, right? On issues across the board, on the problems that people see, you know, in front of them on the streets of Seattle, whether it's addiction or homelessness or whatever, or the affordability stuff or going to the grocery store. And they're just feeling like there isn't a government response right now that's commensurate with the scale of the issues that they're seeing and facing. And that puts the electorate into a kind of you know, I don't know what the word for it is, but Quinn cut this, sorry.
Yeah, cut this,
You
Kenny.
can see the sausage get made on the podcast, but I think
Get the audience to shout
I
out
think
the
it
word.
puts them in kind of a, you know, a fractious and ominous sort of mood.
All right, well, let's move on to our first candidate we're going to talk about, Mayor Bruce Harrell. I don't think earlier last year or whatever anyone would have thought, or at least on this podcast, nobody was really saying they thought Bruce Harrell was in big trouble, but the times have changed. Things have changed. Folks here, I think 43rd District Democrats are hoping he's in trouble because they endorsed his opponent, or one of his main opponents, Katie Wilson. Back in 2021, I was looking that y'all made no endorsements in that race, and Bruce Harrell beat Lorena Gonzalez by something like 20 percentage points.
17.
Well, yeah, close to 20. And
Onto it.
she's sticklers. All right. Well, so anyway, who are we starting with? Sandeep, what do you think? Is Bruce Harrell in trouble?
I would say that Bruce has a real race on his hands. I do think there was this sort of sense, this aura of kind of inevitability. And that's always a dangerous thing when you're a candidate running a campaign. I mean, look at Andrew Cuomo in New York City, right? Where they ran a campaign that was just where it just felt like they were entitled and it was a done deal, and voters don't like that kind of stuff. I do think that there was a sort of vibe that the mayor was untouchable, and they kind of were running a campaign sort of, I think, based on that kind of unconscious assumption that they had kind of had it made. And I think you saw a lot of the sort of political class just kind of fall in line behind the mayor, including on the left, including from like organized labor and folks like that. And so it just looked like he had this sort of juggernaut of a campaign going without having actually campaigned all that hard, right? I do think that bubble has burst, and I think that the mayor and his folks realize they have a battle on their hands, but I also don't know that they've figured out yet. And I'm just a kind of completely detached observer here. I have no involvement in this, but just from my outside perspective, I don't know that they've kind of figured out how to respond to Katie Wilson's challenge.
Detached outside observer, Sandeep Kaushik. Erica, what do you think?
This one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets to, I think Sandeep's absolutely right. I mean, I think the mayor wants to coast on, you know, whatever goodwill he has from the public, and, you know, what we call charisma, which I think is being tall. But, you know,
Yeah.
I think Katie Wilson really surprised him. And it speaks to, you know, what we were talking about last week on the podcast, that, you know, they are searching for some line of attack against Katie Wilson that isn't, you know, she's too wonky or she's too smart. I mean, what do you say against, you know, this kind of quiet transit wonk? And they're trying, you know, they're trying a lot of stuff on. They're trying She's Shama Sawant, but I don't know what's going to land. And I also don't know what the case is for Bruce Harrell. He was elected 3 times as city council member and then left. But, you know, I think it's a higher bar as mayor to prove that you've actually done something, made things better for the city. And he hasn't made that case. I mean, he's out of town a lot. He's, you know, he's just not perhaps the most present mayor we've ever had. So, you know, I think it's a real race.
Like the governor, lots of football metaphors. Though. So, you know, Sandeep, do you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Usually being an incumbent's a good thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't in 2024. And it hasn't been really since COVID, but normally it's a good thing. What about this year? If you're Bruce Harrell, what about incumbency? We've got other local races happening as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd rather there be a challenger than an incumbent in this year right now. I mean, and I will say this, I actually do think the mayor has a case to make, and in ordinary circumstances, I think that case would be pretty effective, which is just to say, look where we are now compared to 4 years ago, right? I mean, that argument, the condition of the city, even a couple of years ago was, pretty fucked up, right? I mean, in the COVID era, there were encampments everywhere. Things felt like they were going in the wrong direction. I think the mayor kind of, came into office after winning the 21 election, came into office in January of 2022. And in some sense, it was sort of low hanging fruit, right? He just sort of restored some of the pre-COVID policies on how they handle stuff like, not letting massive Thunderdome encampments develop and, ending all prosecutions of like low level crimes and stuff like that. And I do think he got a lot of credit for that stuff for a while. But again, that's now crime's down a bit. Like, and I don't know where I think maybe there's a voters who are asking like kind of what's the second act here, right? From the mayor, and they're not sure that the problems they see continuing in the city are being addressed.
I mean, I think that's a very cynical way of looking at the voting public, and maybe that's fair. I don't know, but I think that, the voting, like the people of America, I mean, of the world, like are aware that COVID happened. A lot of people still remember why things got the way that they were. And so I guess like you're bringing endorsement of the mayor, which I'm going to take that as is like he kind of like fell, face first into a recovery that was happening, inevitably because COVID was over, and got a bunch of credit for it. But when you say Act Two, I mean, I guess I want to know what was Act One.
I think that there's a lot of voters who also remember that left lane candidates, including folks like Katie, kind of did take a hard left turn into batshit land, like in a couple of years ago. And I do think, as the mayor's case, I would expect to see them come at some of those vulnerabilities on Katie. There was clearly a backlash against what I would call the kind of radical chic turn of the Seattle left in recent years. Some of that stuff is faded, but like, look what the Trump people did to Kamala. Like, they basically turned her into a, cultural alien from the planet, transsexual Transylvania, right? And got Brad and Janet to like vote for Trump.
I think it's going to be hard to do that to Katie.
Well, I grant you that we talked about this in the last episode, like talking about her as sort of angry or divisive doesn't seem to me like a very good hit. On the other hand, like she's an enthusiastic Shama Sawant backer and supporter. They were testing that too in the polling. And frankly, that gives me huge pause about Katie Wilson. Like that's a disqualifier for me. Like, and I think for a lot
of so anybody in the 43rd district who voted for Shama Sawant was so wrong that you would never vote for anyone in this room.
I'm not sure I'm electing you mayor. Right. Yeah.
I mean, part of the question, right, is what are people pissed off about? Are they really even thinking about Shama Sawant right now? I'm not sure.
This is on the mayor's campaign now. If they're going to make a contrast and a case, they got to make it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think that they got kind of lucky in 2021, right? Because we've talked about this before. I thought Lorena Gonzalez ran a shitty campaign in 21, and in some sense kind of imploded at the end with the. Bruce Harrell is soft on the rape of pretty white girl stuff that blew up in their face. And he ended up coasting to a 17-point win, and they didn't really have to, throw the sharp elbows as much because I think if they're going to take on this Katie challenge, they've got to disqualify her. And I don't know whether they're going to, are they going to do it? We'll see. I don't know.
I know one thing people are pissed off about: Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Basically, they're pissed nationally. I think it had an impact in Canada where there was a huge swing. Liberals were about to lose, conservatives were just going to sail to victory, and then Trump called it the 51st state, and bam, it happened in Australia. And I feel like it had an impact in New York City somehow. Like it's in the zeitgeist. They don't want Trump. They want something further left right now. They want new ideas from the left. That's what Zoran represented. So what about that here, Erica? Are we going to have a Trump-related election, even if we can't quite see it in the opinion polling? Like, is Trump playing a role this year?
Yeah, I mean, if I was Katie Wilson, I would be running ads that, harken back to the fact that Bruce Harrell said that he would work with the Trump administration, and he said he would try to find the areas of commonality. And he said that after Trump was elected and had already, made very clear what he planned to do. And so, it may not be entirely fair to paint the mayor as, a closet Trumpy, but it's certainly not fair to paint, Katie Wilson as a closet Sawantite or whatever Sandeep would call it. But, I do think that that could be an issue because he has not led on Trump in the way that, Attorney General Nick Brown is. He hasn't made a big point. And I realize he's not, the city attorney, but he has not made a big point of opposing the Trump administration in the way that some city council members like Alexis Mercedes Rink have. And I think that that is actually a liability if Katie Wilson wants to use it that way.
Soft on Trump.
Look,
Soft on Trump, Sandeep Kaushik.
First of all, I do think the Trump factor here is really significant in this race. Like there's no freaking question. Again, like the psychology of like a progressive voter in a blue city like Seattle is you can't do first of all, the Trump administration is doing a whole bunch of stuff that has rightfully got people very, very anxious and upset and worried about the future, right? And what the direction of the country, the state of our democracy, all of that stuff is like kind of live front and center for those voters. You can't do much about that on the national level. So a lot of that sort of unhappiness and anxiety translates down to the local level. And we saw that during the first Trump administration in some of our local races. And I do think there's a lot of voters that, when you're feeling really insecure about the future and you look at the kind of people who are in office right now and you're saying, why aren't you doing more to kind of fix things and protect us and make the future better? So I do think there's some vulnerability there. But that said, I would say that both the mayor and Katie are kind of trying to grab this message that they're Trump-proofing the city, right? I mean, the mayor just announced this whole B&O tax thing. We talked about this in a previous episode, that a lot of the justification they're putting it forward for it, I'm not sure how convincingly, is about Trump-proofing the city. That's something obviously the mayor jumped on, and Katie Wilson's talking about Trump-proofing the city, blah, 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 blah. So
I'm just going to say, edit this, Jenny, but your mic technique is a little inconsistent this evening, Sandeep.
okay. Well,
I keep wanting to push it over. Yeah, I mean, I think that, not to go back to graffiti and, cracking down on drug users and all that shit, it does feel like if you're looking at the mayor, he is focused on, stuff that, and the city council too, but, we're talking about the mayor, he is focused on a lot of penny ante shit, like surveillance cameras in the CID that, I mean, I was just at a press conference today, we're recording this on Tuesday, about the real-time crime center, which is a thing we've already have, but now it has surveillance cameras all over the city. We've talked about that before. And it's like, I don't know, is that what the voters are responding to? Are they excited that there's going to be, another surveillance camera of all the private surveillance cameras that are already everywhere, outside, some store on Aurora? I'm not personally excited by that. It feels very small. I mean, even if I was inclined to support mass surveillance, and I think people are very much disinclined to support mass surveillance right now, it feels as though we're in Seattle in a completely different America in some ways, where we're most concerned about these kind of these crimes of aesthetics and crimes that are, relatively small, especially compared to what the Trump administration is bringing.
Sandeep Kaushik, establishment Democrats who don't have any good, fresh, new ideas. It sounds kind of familiar.
we were just talking about this on some other podcasts that we will leave nameless, but look, I mean, crime, street disorder crime, like, rampant, untreated addiction and mental illness on the streets. It's still a fucking issue, right? I mean, that's like, I know there's a lefty view of like, we just hand wave all that shit away.
How's going to deal with addiction though, Sandeep?
Well, I mean, people have concerns about crime and criminal behavior. Putting cameras on Aurora, where there's been a huge increase in shootings, and and obviously a lot of, I think, really terrible behavior related to pimping and exploiting addicted women for prostitution up there. Look, I haven't seen any kind of data on this, but I doubt that that's what's going on. But I want to come back to the mayor here, right? Because we've been kind of hard on the mayor and his campaign so far in this podcast, but I will say this, like, mayor is a really talented retail politician. And the voters of Seattle have tended to really like the guy when he's on his game, right? He does that kind of like, he's great in front of audiences, and he can be really charming and win people over. And he does that hokey, I'm filling the city with love, and blah blah blah, stuff. And voters genuinely like the guy. Like in 21, when they tried to go after him, when the Gonzalez campaign tried to go after him, they tried to go after him as some kind of like Trump acolyte. The IE ad that Labor ran against him was sort of images of January 6th. And oh my God, some guy who gave money to Trump gave money to Bruce Harrell, therefore he's fucking Trump. And, and that was like bullshit, right? Like nobody bought that because they kind of like Bruce Harrell. I will say this though, there's that good side of Bruce Harrell, and then we've been seeing more of the defensive politician side.
He's extremely thin-skinned.
I
would say all politicians actually are extremely thin-skinned,
right.
so that's not like a knock specifically on him, but
if I were
very
in
thin-skinned.
campaign, I would be sitting down with the mayor right now and saying to him, like, look, I know this was supposed to be a cakewalk. It's turned into a race. I know you're feeling a little pressured on this, but you got to get back into the game, Mr. Mayor, and get back to like what people really like about you. I know that, look, the left hates Bruce Harrell. Probably a lot of people in this room have like hated Bruce Harrell from day one. Who cares, right? About you all. Like it's the median voter in Seattle that matters, right? In terms of who's going to win a race.
Well,
and
One Seattle was a good message for him. The whole One Seattle, I mean, it's implicitly the anti-Trump message.
He needs to get back to so what I'm saying.
Where's the angry thing? Where are you getting this? I mean, first of all, every mayor since I've been here has been accused of being angry. That I can't think of one who wasn't.
By more than a few mayors.
They're all angry as far as like who would want to even be mayor? They're just But anyway.
I mean, you
Maybe,
thought
maybe Katie Wilson would be
the line in the Strangers write-up of their endorsement interview with the mayor was not good. Like he went in there and like, kind of,
Pounded on the table.
pounded on the table and vented his frustrations or whatever he did. I wasn't there, right? But it got written up in the Stranger, and it's showing up in Katie Wilson's mail pieces, right? I got a mail piece for her right now, and it's kind of that's not what you want to see from your incumbent mayor. You want to see One Seattle.
And we could talk about the mayor all night, but let's move on to incumbent Republican, speaking of Republicans, Republican City Attorney Ann Davison. She really is a Republican. How's that going to affect her? Do I need to say 43rd District Democrats did not endorse her. They endorsed one of her opponents, Eric Evans.
Who is here, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yep, there she is. So is Ann Davison in trouble? Yes, I think she's in trouble. Next question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's no way not to tag somebody who became a Republican during the first Trump administration with the label Trump Republican. Now she says she's not. She's joined some lawsuits that various city attorneys around the country are filing against Trump. She has filed some herself, but I mean, I don't think she can get that stink off her.
Is she going to lose in November?
I know you always like to make me make predictions, so I'm gonna say yes. I think she's gonna lose.
Nice. I agree. What do you think, Sandeep?
Well, look, being a Republican at a time when Trump is a president of the United States in the city of Seattle is not a great thing. I mean, I'm obviously on the record about this and in saying that previously. That said, I would not count Ann Davison out in this race. And I see Erica's here in the audience. I will tell you, I think you're running too far fucking left in this race, and all of you in the left lane are, and I think that creates an opportunity for. I think that's going to create an opportunity for Ann to push back on you all. Look, I've heard a lot of like talk from people that Ann may get bounced in the primary, and we're going to have two Democrats in this race. I think I'll be very surprised if that's the case. I think that's unlikely. And I do think Erica got the Stranger endorsement. Congratulations on that. And I do think Erica's coming through the primary, and then we're going to have a head-to-head match. I think all these races are going to be close, right? I think the mayor's race right now feels like a close race. I think that race could be closer than.
Just
than
seems like
people think.
running as a Republican, not disavowing it,
I-
not burning your Republican
so
card
if
in
I-
2025 is crazy.
If I can jump in here, I mean, if we're offering advice to candidates, my advice would be don't listen to Sandeep. You're not running too far to the left.
Take
And-
Erica's advice. My advice to you is take all of Erica's advice.
And I will say, if I was running against Dan Davison, I mean, again, like I would call her performative. I mean, the stuff that she has actually done is deeply performative. These soap and soda zones, that they are not enforcing because, I mean, frankly, it's not a top priority of the city to like crack down on people who are smoking fentanyl in a corner somewhere. I mean, they could certainly do that. They could go out there right now and crack a bunch of heads and make a big stink about it. I think one reason they're not doing that is it actually looks quite bad. But I think their thing on prolific offenders, which they came out with, Ann Davison came out with early in her term, this idea that like certain people are extra bad because
Which was
they
effective, actually. But anyway, I don't want to rehash.
I would want to see that, but let me finish my point. I mean, I think, these are just not issues, maybe people responded to those issues during the pandemic when they felt like, oh my God, we've got to do something to clean up the streets and get these encampments out of here. But I don't think they're issues that people find particularly compelling now. And, and I would be running pretty hard against her on those issues. And I'd say, what have you done on DUIs? What have you done on domestic violence? She is not prosecuting the things that she said were her very top priorities. And that's what I would be focusing on and calling her performative on everything else because she is.
Well, anyway, I don't want to argue the merits of Ann Davison's term, though I disagree with that. But look, I mean, like I said, I think these races, I don't want to overreach. So we're about to have the primary, right? In 3 weeks, ballots are going out tomorrow. And we're going to see numbers come out of it. I would not be surprised if Katie Wilson comes in first in the primary in this race. But I would also, if that's the case, I would not overread that result, right? Lorena Gonzalez and Bruce Harrell were essentially tied coming out of the primary in 2021. He ended up winning by 17. Now that was a bigger margin because of her campaign blowing up and doing dumb stuff. But nonetheless, he was headed for like a 10-point, a pretty comfortable win because he had won the debate with her over encampments and crime and all of that stuff. And that's why she was going to this, like Bruce Harrell's a bad man stuff, because they'd lost the actual argument. Right. And
It was
I
a
do
bad
think
time to run as a progressive.
well, right. I mean, it was, and it's a better time to run as a progressive now, but the salience of some of those issues, I don't think have gone away to the extent that you have. I still think you can make a argument around them. And I do think there is an argument to be made that we don't want to go backwards to the shit show of 2020 and 2021. And frankly, when I look at the city attorney's race, that's where I feel like there's a scramble on all 3 of the left lane candidates who are all scrambling to get the stranger's endorsement. And sort of, you want to talk about performative, sort of outperforming themselves about their progressive bona fides in ways that I think create some vulnerabilities in the general election. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, you also said crime is a less salient issue this year, and she's a Republican.
Yeah, the top line point that Ann is still an R is, she's got a big scarlet R tattoo on her forehead. That's, I mean, I'm on the record saying I told her,
Which, as I pointed out, she tattooed there herself.
Now look, she has explicitly said she has never voted for Trump. She caucused for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She's not a far right Trumpy Republican. That's just bullshit. That said, she's still a Republican.
I don't
care. I mean, it's a problem for her.
Let's also talk about Sarah Nelson. This is citywide city council position 9. Once again, 43rd did not endorse Sarah Nelson. You endorsed, who did you endorse for that one? Sorry. Deion Foster. Is that right? So Erica, what are your thoughts about this race? I keep saying, is so-and-so vulnerable? So-and-so vulnerable. Should I ask the same thing? Is Sarah Nelson vulnerable this year? Is she in trouble? Is she in trouble?
I would say, I think she is unpopular. And I think that is a real liability for her. I mean, she is, as the council goes, she is very conservative. And she's done a lot of stuff that has been, highly public, that has made a lot of people really mad at her, including shutting down city council meetings when people are yelling or they don't agree or they're, protesting in a way that she doesn't like. I mean, she used to she would shut down council meetings or attempt to or threaten to when people were clapping. And so I think that she is, she's just not a, and Sandeep was talking about Bruce Harrell being a good retail politician. I do not think she is a good retail politician. And, again, like I am not trying to cast aspersions on that. I would be a terrible retail politician. That's why I don't run for office, among many other
I
reasons.
think she'd be good. Don't you
You're
think
not,
But-
you're
Erica
not
could
filling the city with love, Erica.
But yeah, I mean, I think she is very vulnerable, and and I think that Deion Foster comes across as a principled lefty who's not, I mean, she's not saying anything that puts her, necessarily on Sandeep's hit list of people to go after. I don't think, although maybe I'm wrong.
Dion, I know Dion, I like Dion.
And so, I mean, she has a likable, smart, viable opponent. And, and frankly, I mean, we'll hopefully talk a little bit about District 2, but, there are races this year with people who are actually qualified, which I think is in contrast in a lot of races from the last time we voted in 2023. And so I think that's actually exciting. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Sarah has a real race on her hands.
It's a real race. Sure. Like I said, I think they're all real races.
Oh, and
right now.
I think
Yeah,
she'll probably lose.
I mean,
Since we're just wildly making predictions.
it's a real
Appreciate
race.
that.
And that said, like, we were talking about Katie Wilson in her campaign, which I actually think Katie's campaign has a lot of energy to it and momentum. She's got a bunch of volunteers, they're out doorbell and they're doing all this stuff. Like Katie's visible. I'm seeing her on social media. I'm seeing her, in various places. I don't see that same level of energy from Dion's campaign.
Isn't social media Truth Social for you?
Yeah. I'm not in the ghetto of blue sky where you like your perpetual progressive circle jerk continues unabated, right? So I will say this about Sarah Nelson and her campaign right now. I think she's sort of semi-quietly made a couple of big moves over the last 6 months that will redound to her benefit politically. The first of them, we were just talking about how affordability, particularly housing affordability, is a top line issue in the city of Seattle right now in these races. And she has an argument to make that she took on powerful entrenched interests, the Port of Seattle, to build a huge public fight to build 1,000 units of mostly affordable housing in the vicinity of their stadiums. All these forces aligned against her, and she won that fight. I think that's a good argument that she can make about saying, I'm making big, bold moves to try to address issues, even when I have to battle entrenched interests to do it. That's a good argument for her. I think the other thing is the thing we talked about recently on the podcast, where she said she wants to earmark a chunk of the impending sales tax money to go to treat addiction and mental illness issues on the streets of Seattle. I think that's a really smart play on her part. Politically, I think it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, we've talked about the policy implications there, but right now we're talking about the politics of it. And I think that's good politics for her, again, and saying, I'm making a move to solve a freaking problem that people are seeing on the streets of Seattle when no one else is. Everyone wants to raise taxes just to perpetuate a kind of ineffective, inadequate status quo, and I want to take some funding and actually deliver.
This all sounds great. I don't think that's a campaign she's running, though. I mean, and
let's see what they do in their campaign communication.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, to be fair to Sarah Nelson too. I mean, I think she is, she did do that deal in defiance of the port. I mean, I supported that editorially, and I think it was a good deal. I think we need housing, even anywhere. And I think that she is not an anti-urbanist, and I think she gets tagged with that because she's not a progressive. But she's a little, she's not as predictable, and we've talked about this before. She's not as predictable as as you might expect. She doesn't vote like the Bob Kettle party line or the I don't know, Rob Saka party line. Is that such a thing? Like
this, Erica, since you bring this up, I'm going to go to our first audience question. We'll take some audience questions in a minute, but this one just kind of cracked me up. Is the Seattle Times partially responsible for the NIMBY vibe in the city?
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, Danny Westneat, is inexplicably the most influential person in Seattle. And I don't know what to do about that. I mean, cancel your subscription, call and complain, or maybe you like him. I don't know. I mean, he's right some of the time, stop clocks and all that. But I think they're incredibly influential. And I don't understand why they're an out of town paper, essentially, arguing from the perspective of Bellevue.
I'm not sure is there a NIMBY vibe in the city right now? I actually feel like we've talked about this before.
Nibbies are dead.
You want to talk about
Like-
trees
like-
for
like,
about
I
6
think there's-
hours?
I think public attitudes in Seattle are evolving really, really rapidly in a pro-density, pro-urbanist direction. And we've seen that over the last few years. I've posted on social media about this showing polling data over the last 2 or 3 years, showing really, really rapid movement in a pro-urbanist direction. There's still, I mean, I think we've talked about this before too. I think the urbanists have saddled themselves with a bunch of like dumb, intersectional baggage that makes it harder for them to win the actual battles over density and urbanism. But that said, I don't know that, I mean, so is it the Seattle Times fault to the extent that there is an NIMBY vibe? No, not really. I mean, I think it's, there's an old Seattle, like an older, old school Seattle of kind of the old kind of, Jet City, Boeing bungalow,
A Bletheany vibe.
the Mossback Seattle, right? That really lesser Seattle, right? That was the whole 80s kind of that was where the left was in the 80s, right? In Seattle. It was anti-growth, anti-density, anti-development. It wanted to preserve Seattle as this unique and uniquely sort of provincial, like kind of provincial city off on the, far edge of the known universe, right? And that contingent of those folks are older, they're fading out of, demographically fading out of the electorate, but they still exist significantly,
old
and they're
hippies.
the backbone of kind of.
You guys are both wrong.
Yeah.
This is not true. I mean, yes, that those people do still come to city council meetings, but there is a new contingent of NIMBYs. And I mean, if you come to any city council meeting, we're not going to get into trees. We don't have 6 hours, but like if you come to any city council meeting that even vaguely tangentially relates to trees, I mean, you will see a dozen people at least lined up to give public comment, and they are not all boomers. It's a lot of people who, maybe have tech money. I don't know how they afforded their homes.
They should
but
start a podcast, The New NIMBYs.
yeah.
Like, all right, let's go to, because we don't have too much time. City Council Position 8. This is Progressive Democrat Alexis Mercedes Rick, endorsed by the 43rd. Seattle Times didn't endorse in this race
They did not.
at all. So, I mean, is it even a race?
It doesn't feel like a right now, like no. Yeah, I mean, I think Alexis is going to win.
They skip over this one, in fact.
This is the one race where I feel like Alexis is going to win. She's got another very vocal Republican, Rachel Savage, right, who's running against her.
Yeah, the owner of the Vajra here.
There's somebody
23.
I met and quite liked. Sorry.
So much that
I'm
you can't remember their name. I don't remember the name of the other person in the race either, to be honest.
Anyway, sorry, cut that part. Anyway, look, it doesn't fit. There isn't a whole lot of a real sort of race going on in that one.
You guys are just, no. Okay, all right, let's do District 2, South Seattle. The only district race this year, because it's an open seat. Bruce Harrell at one time represented the actual District 2, I think, when we first went to council districts. Then it was Tammy Morales. She resigned last year. Now it's an open seat. We've got 4
Tanya
interesting
Wu.
candidates. Oh, Tanya Wu, right, of course, appointed to the race,
Mm.
has run for that race a few times.
Appointed to District
District 2.
to District 8.
Oh, she was 8.
She ran in the position 8, right? The city
Position 8.
She
Please
ran
cut
in
all
position
this,
8.
editor.
Yeah, sorry, cut all that. Anyway, all right.
You
So
guys are seeing how it actually goes every week.
Seattle Times endorsed
resigning.
Adonis Duckworth, who's a transportation policy advisor to Mayor Bruce Harrell. Stranger endorsed Eddie Lynn, who's a lawyer who works in the Seattle City Attorney's Office. So there's 2 candidates who, if history is any judge, might get through. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and the other candidate who was trying, I think, very hard for the stranger endorsement was Jamie Fackler, and I'm bringing him up because he works for the building department in the city, and he's a building inspector, labor guy. And the thing that is so interesting about this race to me, and like it always blows my mind that people continue running for city council, because I feel like it's getting to be a worse and worse and worse job. But all 3 of these guys work for the city, and they actually know the job to some extent. Like, they know something about how the city works. And again, I mean, it's just such a contrast from 2023 when this backlash came in, and, all the people who were like, wanting to clean up the streets and promising, that everything would be, shiny and beautiful. Those people didn't have any experience. And so it's exciting to me that this race has so many people. I mean, all three of these guys, I think, any of them would be totally acceptable. I think it's an exciting race for District 2.
Look, I think Eddie Lynn and Adonis Ducksworth are coming through in this race, right? They're one endorsed by the Seattle Times, the other by the Stranger. I do think they're both really good candidates. Adonis has city experience. Eddie works at the city attorney's office doing housing law stuff. I'm supporting Adonis in the race, but I like them both. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good, it's going to be a good showdown in the general election between the two of them. Look, I will say this, both of them, Eddie included. Sorry, you guys are distracting me.
Sorry, yeah.
Cut that, Gwen. But both of them, Eddie included, even though he's running, they aren't actually that far apart on a lot of issues, right? Including on the public safety stuff, right? Eddie is kind of more left, maybe a little bit more open to progressive taxation and some of that stuff on the economic side. On the public safety stuff, they're both been, fairly moderate, right, in their views on public safety, and saying, like, down there in Southeast Seattle, there's a lot of concern about gun violence, other sorts of crime, and those sorts of issues. They're both sort of, have not taken kind of hardline anti-cop kind of positions. So that's kind of interesting, right? You've got a left lane candidate, a Stranger endorsed candidate, who's not towing the Stranger line on public safety stuff.
Audience questions in just a minute. Let's do
We should talk about the King County execs race.
let's see if we get one from the audience. But before we end, I think we should go with Denny Blaine.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that ruling. Everybody, if you saw the Seattle Times story, a judge ordered an end to nudity at Denny Blaine Park. This was King County Superior Court Judge Samuel Chun. He's giving the city 2 weeks to submit a plan stopping public acts of masturbation and sex, as well as nudity as constituted. So I was reading this and I couldn't figure out what that meant. What is nudity as constituted?
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling. I mean, I haven't read the entire injunction yet. I started a little bit earlier, but I mean, the ruling it seems very open to challenge. I'll say that, because I mean, it's basically basically what the judge says is indecent exposure is illegal in parks. Therefore, you have to ban nudity when it constitutes indecent exposure. I mean, it's like, it's a circle. I mean, I don't know exactly how this is going to be enforced. I don't think it's possible to prevent people from masturbating. I mean, unless you just like post the masturbation police, at all four corners of the park. So I think this ruling is going to be challenged, and I think it might be challenged successfully because of the vagueness.
Look, I'm not a lawyer. Like, nudity is like kind of non-prurient nudity is legal, as I understand it, in the city of Seattle. So that did give me pause. I don't quite know what that phrase means in the judge's ruling. That said, look, if there's, people going there and kind of engaging in lewd behavior and jerking off and sexual acts and shit like that, like, and they presented evidence of that, right? They collected the plaintiffs in the case presented evidence in court saying this is going on and the city's not doing anything about it. And I think that's probably why they got the judge to side with them on this stuff. And look, that's a legit complaint, like, kind of saying, because we don't want to be uptight about nudity in the park, we have to accept, that people get to jerk off or they want.
But I don't think anybody has said that. I mean, this is
exactly like, that seems like a slippery slope.
This is like another case of making things extra illegal in the city of Seattle. We did it with drugs. We're doing it with graffiti. We're doing it with chronic nuisance properties. I mean, there's a long list of things where, the city, or in this case, this judge, is saying masturbation is already illegal. public urination is already illegal. There's lots of stuff that's illegal in parks. And by the way, I mean, those things go on in other parks that are not, that are not Denny Blaine. And I don't think that they have been targeted in the same way, because I think that, this is a rich guy going up against an LGBTQ plus park. And so
I don't think it's about the LGBTQ
Well,
piece of it. As
I will
much
say
as
this.
it is-
I was in the waterfront park. I was in the waterfront park this weekend, and the World Naked Bike Ride rode by me. And like, I mean, you could argue, if you wanted to be prudish about it, that like there were tons of little kids, with all these dicks going by, and like
But riding your bike naked is not the same as like jerking off in a public park, right? I mean, there's a
that's-
difference.
but-
There's a quality.
But this is about nudity. It's not about public masturbation specifically. It's not about, pissing on a tree specifically, because those things are already illegal.
That's Sandeep. Nudity is constituted.
Yeah, and that's weird, and I don't really understand it. And if the judge means that you shouldn't be allowed to be nude under any circumstances in that park, that does seem like an overreach to me, right? That seems like what? That's not really, as far as I understand, it's legal to be nude in the park if you're not, engaging in unwarranted behaviors while you just the act of being naked is not illegal, as I understand it.
And
So-
I want to get to the issue of
But
whether
there's a
this is
distinction.
targeting this park. I mean, I was looking through the code of conduct, because his reference is a code of conduct in the city. And so I looked up the code of conduct in parks, and you would not believe how much shit is illegal in parks. So, I mean,
That happens all the time.
that happens all the time. And I guarantee you, public masturbation happens in the city of Seattle all the time, not just in this park. So does, so does smoking. So does,
You should get in trouble if you do it, right?
you should get in trouble if you smoke in a park.
No,
Okay.
but
I mean, good luck enforcing that.
I'm sorry, but this idea that like we have to like, tolerate,
I think you've made your
sexual
point.
activity.
I think
in
you've
park-
made your
yeah,
point.
yeah.
All right, so we've got some audience questions. Let's get to those. This one, we've already talked about nice things to say about Jamie Fackler. So we got to that one. What specific zoning or permitting changes do you see as effective to increase housing supply and make sure that it is equitably distributed across all neighborhoods? See, you should run for office. And here's your first question.
Well, here's why I wouldn't get elected. Get rid of zoning. If there need to be rules, I mean, zoning started, originally to prevent, industrial uses right next to housing. So if we need to prevent that, fine. But get rid of zoning and allow apartments to develop anywhere. I mean, that's my platform.
There you go. You want to Houstonify the city?
yeah.
Like,
I do. I'm from Houston.
Yeah.
There's many great things about it.
It's
Like
it is-
Tokyo.
Honestly, I was just there. It's
Seattle,
not as good as
Detroit,
people say.
Texas. We're gonna import Tom DeLay and get rid of zoning.
You really like Houston? I mean, like, there's
I do really like
but
Houston.
man, you just drive around, you're like, it's just like one shopping mall, one road, one.
There's
it just-
magic in those shopping malls, David.
All right.
You just have to know how to find it.
I'm gonna take this answer on a little bit of a tangent, because I do think it's really interesting, because the comp plan is front and center right now at the council, and yet it doesn't feel like it's been a front and center political issue in the campaign so far, right? Like people just don't seem. I don't quite get it.
It
Get
was last time, and it was kind of, I don't think it resonated for people to get up there and say, I'm for comp plan Z.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Lied about it too.
Right.
does get wonky really fast, and maybe, but the argument just doesn't seem to be. And I will say this: I'm not hearing that much in the way of concrete proposals from many of the candidates on a whole range of issues. Like a lot of this election still does feel like it's back to the old vibes election, the kind of center left versus left, and it's just about who gets the stranger and who gets the Times. And I'm not really like, look at the King County execs race. This is what race I wanted to talk about. Like I like Yermai, I like Claudia. They're both two King County council members. I think that's another hard fought race. It looked at the beginning like Yermai was going to be the sort of anointed front runner. I think it's a real race now, but I saw Claudia's got some momentum and some energy in that race, but I also I don't know what that race is fucking about. Like what,
candidates,
like,
about
like,
candidates.
yeah,
Yeah.
what are they running on? And
Well,
what's the
and they're-
difference between them? And what are you gonna do if you get elected that's
They
different
should
from the
talk
other?
more about zoning is what you're saying.
Yes.
That'll,
I mean, talk about anything. I don't really care, but give me something
All right.
like.
I mean, there's just not that much daylight between them. That's part of the problem.
But-
So it is a personality race.
That's what a campaign is supposed to be about. Like figure out an issue, grab onto it, drive the issue and say, if you elect me, I'm going to fucking do this. And that guy isn't, you know,
you gotta get the fucking in there.
make that the differentiator. I'm just not seeing that in that race. I'm not seeing it yet. And we're early yet. We're just getting into the real meat of it's that last 3 weeks after ballots drop is when you're really going to see the messages start to come into play in all of these races. But at least so far, I just haven't seen a lot of efforts by candidates other than to kind of sell bio and vibes to differentiate and to do issues.
Erica, before I go to the next question, do you want to say anything more about the King County executive race?
I mean, I think it is absolutely a race. And I think it, it is vibes because there is just not, I mean, despite the fact that, Girmay is getting the left endorsements, Claudia is getting the right endorsements. I think that is partly because Claudia is from Bellevue and she long ago was in charge of the youth jail. But Girmay Zahalai has supported the youth jail. And so even on like this kind of supposedly like toxic issue, I mean, they're not really very far apart.
Yeah,
It's all good vibes.
He's backpedaled from a lot of the wokety woke shit, right? That he got on board with. And and good for him. Maybe he's had a political evolution on this stuff, but I had a conversation with him maybe about a year ago where I was surprised, but he knows what I think about some of the public safety issues. So he came over to me and he was telling me about, Sandeep, I've been talking to the Somali elders in my community and they're really concerned about crime and public safety. And like, we really need to do more on the, and I was like, that's great. Like good on him. But, then what is the difference between them?
Well,
right?
one really quick point, and like Publico is not endorsing in this race, but I will say one thing that I have long admired about Claudia, who I've known longer, is that she doesn't change her position based on who she's talking to. And I have seen a little bit of that with Girmay when he talks to, the stranger. I think he might say a slightly different thing than he says when he talks to Sandeep Kaushik.
Yeah, well, maybe, look, on the vibe front, there's real differences between them. Girmay's obviously young, up and comer, charismatic, smart. I think he's got a good argument to make that he has done some stuff like the mental health, the centers, right? The ballot measure that he and Teresa Mosqueda ran. That's a good selling point for him. Claudia is a veteran council member. She's run the jail. She's run various,
She's the reason there's a starter line of light rail on the east side.
right. Her
people in
transport.
Seattle, not
Let's
California,
move on
but in
here
the county.
now to the next question. We have certain campaigns, this questioner from the 43rd asks, we have certain campaigns work together, like canvassing together, while others have not. I've heard it's often driven by consultants. What role do you see consultants playing in campaigns collaborating?
That's a good question. I think there is, it actually often is driven by consultants, so I can sort of, I'm friends with all these people, so I'm going to be careful about what I say here. But yeah, no, I do think sometimes you've got candidates who share a consultant are kind of more likely to see them kind of doing stuff together or coordinating sometimes. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole behind the scenes world of campaigns and how they work that it's not worth getting into here. But look, I do think it creates some awkward situations sometimes, depending on who's got which consultant, right? Like right now, the mayor's got Christian Sinderman, but he's also working with Erica. He's working with you, right? In that race, he's working with Alexis in her race. And so, it's just, anyway, I'm gonna shut up because I'm gonna start saying things that are gonna get me in trouble. But I just think that that sometimes, yeah, the sort of the consultant on consultant stuff can get awkward.
I mean, Sandeep made all the points I was going to make.
All right. We could end it there, or I could do one more question. Cut what I'm saying here.
Okay.
All right. So if you had to say, is the city swinging further left this year? Yes or no? Erica C. Barnett.
Yes. And if I can elaborate, I mean, I think the city, in particular, after watching the city council for the last 2 years, I think people are kind of disappointed to horrified. And they are swinging away from that backlash from 2023.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of a perpetual cycle of Seattle. But I think like the 2023 backlash election, I think has had some real impacts because we basically replaced almost the entire Seattle City Council.
Right, because we were horrified by the previous council, right?
Disappointed to horrified.
Your question is the city, like, at the end of the day, like,
Oh,
come
yeah, are we swinging
November,
further left? Is that where things are headed?
maybe, I don't know, probably, but maybe I would go as far as probably,
You
but
sound so sad.
what's that?
You sound so sad.
No,
What do you think? Like 70%?
It's like-
It's probably 70% or 40%, 55%.
there's left and there's batshit left, right?
And
my
identifying
concern-
exactly
my
which
concern is
candidates
that
are
we're-
batshit.
Yeah, well, my concern is that at the end of the day, it's the policies you implement that matter and whether they're delivering results or not. And if you're implementing stupid policies that don't work and you double down on them, which is what I see too often from overly ideological Seattle elected officials and candidates, particularly from the left in recent cycles, then I'm not on board with that, man. And that's not just a problem for the politics of the city, but that's a problem for the governance of the city.
I mean, I would say the policy that any elected official in the city has doubled down on most is Rob Saka's defense of that fucking curb and removing it and getting it out of his way.
You should get t-shirts or something.
There are t-shirts.
All right, that's what the curve.
He's not on the left.
We are obsessed with the curve. That's it for another edition of Seattle Nice. I'm David Hyde. She's Erickson Barnett. He's Sandeep Kaushik. Our editors are Quinn Waller and Jenny Cecil Moore. And our hosts are the 43rd District Democrats. Thank you.
Thank you.
There one more time. That's fun.
Thank you all so much for experimenting in that way with us. Okay.
They've got more show. to
Yeah,
do.
we got more to do. Next up, we have our wonderful 43rd reps. So let's hear it for Representative Nicole Macri, Representative Sean Scott, and Senate Majority Leader Jamie Peterson. And I think I'm gonna need you three to share those two mics as I read questions, but the way we're going to format it this is we're going to give them a little bit of time to say hi and check in with everyone. And then I've got some questions that were submitted in writing, and then we'll also take some questions from the Zoom. So I'll start by handing it off to all of you.
All right, I'm going to go first. Jamie Peterson, I'm your state senator. What I want to direct your attention to first is that although there's an awful lot of attention on city politics and city races, which are important, unusually for an odd year, we have a bunch of Senate special elections and House. But in particular, I have 3 of my members who are subject to significantly funded challenges. 2 from Republicans and 1 from a business-backed Democrat. And the outcome of those races will determine whether we can continue to go in the direction that we went fast this year, passing rent stabilization, passing a permit to purchase, passing the Recycling Reform Act, passing a big investment in special education for our schools, or if we're going to head in the direction of a lot more cuts, because we know that we're going to face continuing budget pressures, especially with what's coming from Washington, D.C. So I want to focus your attention on the 5th district. That's where my Senator Bill Ramos passed away, unfortunately, toward the end of session, and Representative Victoria Hunt was appointed to fill the seat. She's facing a challenge from gun supporter and far-right Chad Mogendance, a Republican. Because of redistricting after the Yakima case was decided last year, that district has gotten significantly more swingy. And there's a very real risk that we could lose that seat. That one is very close by, Issaquah and East King County. Senator Deb Krishnadasan is defending a seat. She was appointed to the 26th district when Emily Randall was elected to Congress. And Deb, in that very swingy district, the 26th, which is basically Port Orchard south to Gig Harbor, South Kitsap, and then the western part of Pierce County, is trying to defend her seat. She's being attacked with hundreds of thousands of dollars of ads from business folks who are upset that we passed an increase in the capital gains tax, that we passed a B&O surcharge, a B&O tax surcharge on large businesses, and that we passed an increase in the tax on large estates in order to balance our budget this year. And then over in Bellevue and Kirkland, Senator Vandana Slatter, who was appointed to fill the seat when Patty Cooterer became our insurance commissioner, is facing a very well-funded challenge from Representative Amy Wallen, who is another Democrat, but who is running significantly to the right of Senator Slatter with support from business. So I really encourage you, if you care about the direction of the state, to choose one of these races, at least one, and get involved in whatever way you can, whether that's donating money, whether it's going and doorbelling. But we really need your help because people aren't expecting the state legislature to be up for grabs in an odd year. And we have got to bring focus and attention to this opportunity to support our values. Thank you. Oh, and before I finish, I just want to say a huge thank you to Ryan for promises kept. I really nagged at him when he was trying to become the chair of the 43rd about going back to having in-person opportunities for us to interact. I'm really grateful to the 43rd for going down this path and look forward to supporting more of that in the future. Thank you.
We used to always let Frank go last, so we're going to let Sean go last this time. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Macri, and I'm one of your two state representatives in the State House, and it's great to be here. I want to start off by echoing thanks to the 43rd E-Board and to Ryan for pulling together not only an in-person meeting at a great venue, that I could walk to from my house, but also just, oh my gosh, what a first in-person meeting with Nick Brown and the Seattle Nice podcast folks coming here. When Ryan asked me to join Jamie and Sean to do a little legislative update, I was like, sure. And then he was like, oh, and also Nick Brown is coming, and Erica and Sandeep and David from Seattle Nice. I'm like, okay, we're like last billing, no problem. But it's still a delight to be here. I want to also echo what Jamie said. So there are 9 legislative races, 5 Senate seats and 4 House seats. I really want to underscore the 5th and the 26th. So that's Victoria Hunt, who's the candidate in the 5th, and Deb Krishnadasan. We also, of the 4 seats we have in the House, I want to also put a plug in for the race in the 33rd legislative district, that's South King County. Edwin Obrus was appointed to the House this session when Tina Orwell moved over to the Senate, similar to the 48th, where there is a business-backed Democrat from our caucus, Amy Wallen, who have done some great work with on certain issues. But who I haven't actually endorsed Vandana in that race. Similar to that race, we have a business-backed Democrat running in the 33rd, challenging or running against Edwin, and that is Kevin Schilling, the Burien City Council member and mayor, who has led on a lot of anti-homeless, anti-camping ordinances, pretty challenging I think, inhumane policies at the city level. And so there are efforts happening to really turn out a people-powered campaign for Edwin Obra. So I want to put a plug in for that race as well. And I just want to underscore, these races are going to be important because there's a lot coming at us. So we can talk about the continued challenges of the state budget, right? The big theme of this last session was the big budget shortfall and the approach we took to create a balanced budget. So revenue forecasts came out a few weeks ago in June. And when we look out on the 4-year outlook on the state budget, we are deep in the hole. So that was somewhat moderated by the fact that we did pass significant revenue. Now, we did not pass all the revenue that House and Senate Democrats had originally proposed in both of our budget proposals. But we did pass what Jamie talked about, the big B&O surcharges on the large corporations, estate tax, capital gains, et cetera. But we made some pretty significant cuts. Some of those cuts were on future-looking things that we had planned to do that we said we're going to slow down and not implement as quickly as we had planned to, but some of those were actual cuts to things that were ongoing programs. We made significant investments in special education, but we cut a lot of the auxiliary programs that the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction was funding, a lot of our grant programs across the state. And we made cuts in healthcare, including cutting Medicaid rates modestly. And so going into this next session, we're faced with our own continued budget challenges at the state level. Of course, we also have this, horrific big betrayal bill from the federal government that will roll out slowly, but is going to be relevant to our work this next session because the timing of it is relevant to how we do budgeting in Washington State, which is unique. We're the only state in the country that is required to have a 4-year balanced budget. And so that the implementation of the federal budget act that has already passed is going to come into play in our 2026 supplemental budgeting. And on top of that, we know that Congress is currently considering their appropriation bills. We don't know the timing of when those will get passed, but it's not looking great. I'll just say that. So those are some things that I think I want to underscore, just the importance of these races. I know we're really focused on the local stuff, and the local races are important, and we've got some big ones this cycle. But in the next few weeks, I will just implore you to take a look at some of these key state legislative races as well.
Well, certainly the protection and expansion of Democratic majorities in the House and Senate is something that all of us, especially in the 43rd LD, should hope to see. The last time that Republicans were in control of any chamber of government in our state, they ratified and passed a pretty disastrous school funding bill that is the root cause of many of the school funding issues that I think we have seen a lot of people be justifiably outraged about. Simultaneously, I think in the 43rd LD, there are many people in this very reliable LD that are probably asking the question of whether or not the question of governance for Democrats is one of protecting power or one of wielding it. I have to confess that for most of the legislative session, it was pretty difficult to see a difference between some of the policy imperatives that were coming from the White House, which were at that point threatened, from the ones that were coming from the governor's office, which were very real. Threatened reductions to public employee salaries, furloughs, some of the cuts that Representative Macri had mentioned were definitely a big ingredient for why I ended up casting a no vote on the budget, because I did not believe that it reflected the values that I personally was sent to Olympia to try to enact. We are a team in Olympia. We're doing our best all of us, I think, to make sure that we're responding in the most fair ways to, I think, a budgetary reality from the federal situation that is simultaneously catastrophic, but also very, very predictable. One of the reasons why I was also disappointed to not see the governor come out in full-throated support of a wealth tax. I do believe that any talk about protecting Washington state from what's going on in Washington, D.C. without a concomitant urge towards taxing the rich basically amounts to political theater. There's no way that you can actually resist the many billions of cuts that we're talking about from the federal level without doing something about it with our own tax code. And I know that's something that we're all committed to as well. By the way, my name is Representative Scott from the 43rd LD. Great to be here with everybody.
Okay, moving on to questions from our members. First question. On July 1st, the Washington State Library Research Room was forced to close to the public due to the legislative failure to include the $6.7 million requested to fund library services in the budget. Would you support a special session to fund the state library?
So I want to say I'm concerned. I know there's been some conversation like in the Seattle Times after the HR1, the Federal Reconciliation Act passed, the governor kind of mused about doing a special session. I want to say the cuts that we made this last session and this one about the Library Resource Center is a good example, are real and that they're harmful. And I'll say, while most legislators, as I understand it, after session, have spent their time talking about how they protected stuff. As an operating budget writer, I have spent my time since legislative session meeting with folks who have experienced these very real cuts. We cut $7 billion out of the state operating budget over the 4-year period. You cannot do that without harming individual programs and communities. And so we have work to do to build back those cuts that we have made. Now, as Sean said, those cuts were much deeper than the ones that we had originally proposed in our initial budget proposals, because we did include a wealth tax, which the governor said he would not sign. He would not sign a budget that included a wealth tax, and he would not sign a wealth tax bill. And so that really put us in a corner. And then I'll say it is actually a lot harder to pass taxes in reality than the concept of it. Even we did a lot of work with our caucus over many, many months talking about different tax proposals. But when you're in those four marble walls and, the army of corporate lobbyists are there, you find that the tax bills get curated down and down and down. And so as budget writers, our box of funding got smaller and smaller. Whether or not a special session is relevant, I want to say there is a lot of risk in doing a special session because our budget picture is more grim today than it was when we left the legislative session on April 27th. And I am not sure that calling Democrats back to a special session will get us the results that folks here in the 43rd would like to see. So I think we just have to think about that carefully. I think what could call us back to potentially to a special session is if there is continued action that happens before November on the federal budget that commands us to take more swift action. But in general, I think that our budget work, including looking at what we can do, is going to happen during the regular session. I mean, I hate to predict what happens because I'm almost always wrong, but that's that asking me now, that's what I think is likely to happen. And I know that's super painful because there are programs that are stopping, effective July 1st. And that's starting now. And now we're starting to hear not only from the folks who are invested in running those programs, but from the community members who benefit from those programs that have ceased.
Thank you. Voters want a crisis care clinic in our district, but it's taking too long for leaders to lead and make it happen. How committed to the will of the people are you, and what will you do to stop the anti-democratic dilly-dallying?
So I do see some faces in the crowd here that were present for a town hall that my office held. I believe it was last week to try to rally support for the Crisis Care Center. April of 2023, voters in King County by a pretty substantial margin, if I remember correctly, it was 12 or 13 points, did support a modest property tax increase for the purpose of creating new behavioral health, mental health centers across our region. 5 locations in total. One of those would be in the heart of the 43rd LD on the side of the polyclinic at present on Broadway and Union. And so that was a town hall that I believe is going to make a material difference in not only the swiftness, hopefully, with which that facility opens, but the shape that it takes. We had a very robust conversation about what it would look like to have care team members from the city of Seattle, for example, usher folks to and from that center. People who brought up a number of very important issues around making sure that the folks who staff that facility are union workers, because they are best trained to handle the kinds of sensitive issues and populations that would be best served by a center. Even hearing some of the opposition at that town hall was helpful as well. To the extent that there was opposition, it was around the question of public safety concerns and whether or not the clinic would exacerbate them. The consensus, both from the presenters and I would say from folks in the crowd, was that a crisis care center would actually be a public safety solution. Many of the people who we see on our streets, in grocery stores, outside, or in states of distress where they actually need help and not a gun and a badge response. So I've, to the extent that I can as a state lawmaker, tried to use my platform in my office to make sure that we're amplifying the voices of people who want to see that center happen. Thus far, what I've seen is that it's overwhelmingly popular. As far as the political considerations, I'll leave that to Senator Peterson to address about.
I'll just, I'll just say that was a great town hall event. The room was packed. It was super hot that night, and people hung around until the very end, which was really, really great, and a lot of great conversation and a nice counterbalance to what we have heard about the opposing views on that, which a lot of it, I think, has been the usual. I've done a lot of sightings of mental health and centers and low-income housing, and these kinds of engagement tend to follow a similar trajectory. In general, I think people want to understand, like, what are you talking about? What is it going to look like? And, tell me, as Sean just said, like, are there going to be public safety concerns? How are they going to be managed? And tell me specifically what that's going to look like. I'll say I also had the opportunity to talk about the crisis care center initiative, including the Broadway site, on Converge, Angela Poe Russell's show that aired last night that you can find, I think, on YouTube, just to really raise the profile of this initiative and do some education as part of a panel of folks. So I think, 43rd Legislative District reps are all in for the Crisis Care Center. I think the Polysite Clinic location is an excellent location. It is a healthcare facility that is perfectly situated to do the healthcare that we know that so many people in our community need. And so if you haven't contacted the mayor and the city council, those are the people where the process is now. King County is, I think, about ready to purchase this property. They're doing a little bit more due diligence, but part of the crisis care levy ordinance at the county requires an affirmative nod from the local jurisdiction. So they're waiting for that from the city of Seattle. So if you haven't contacted your city council members and the mayor, please do that, because that will help.
And if you haven't done it yet, you'll get a link again in your Sunday email with a pre-form letter that you can customize that'll go right to those people. So please do so if you haven't yet. We're going to try to get 2 more questions in. Next one, what actions, so Denny Blaine Park has been a topic of conversation this evening. What actions are you willing to take to protect Denny Blaine as a queer space?
Yeah, this is a difficult question, not so much because of the question about whether there should be a protected queer space. There should be. People should be able to use the park the way that they've used the park for many decades. And we ought to be able to find a way to make that happen. A couple of years ago, Nicole and I were around to our horror, the Liquor Control Board, Liquor and Cannabis Board, started enforcing against gay bars on Capitol Hill the lewd conduct regulations that they had in effect for 50 years and never enforced, but here they were suddenly. And the legislature was able to take swift action because it was our agency, and essentially told them, you're going to repeal that ordinance, or, and it is ineffective immediately. You won't be enforcing that way. This is a little bit different because we're talking about a city park, and we're talking about the law of nuisance, which is sort of common law. I'm hopeful that the judge's ruling is just going to be overturned through the normal court process, and that we'll be back to the state that we were in before. But I do have some hesitation about having people, I'm sorry to name them, but from Kettle Falls, from Republic, or from Othello, or from Battleground, making decisions about what can happen and what can't happen in Seattle parks and the precedent that sets. It isn't generally the state's role to be doing that kind of enforcement. So I think we're going to be watching really carefully. I'm hopeful that the legal process, by the time we get into the legislative session, has worked itself out so that that space is reestablished as a safe space for queer folks. And if it's not, then I think we'll have to consider carefully the risks and rewards of having the state intervene.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, our last question, and this is from one of our 43rd board members. Because of the big betrayal bill, my Medicaid is being cut, and it is Medicaid for as is the Medicaid for many within Seattle, the Seattle disability community. Many of us receive care for serious long-term health conditions. Is there anything the state legislature can do to help our communities, and what can 43rd members do to help?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So first of all, what I want to say, so we have one immediate Medicaid cut, which had to do with Planned Parenthood, that's going into effect. And the governor jumped in very quickly and actually came to the 43rd to announce that the state was going to backfill $11 million to make sure that that funding for reproductive health care would continue uninterrupted until the legislature comes back next year into session. Most of the cuts to Medicaid do not go into effect until after the 2026 midterms. And so I think the first thing to say is we have got a massive opportunity, folks. What they did was remarkably against the interests of their constituents all across the country to pay for tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires by cutting health care for poor people. So we need to hold the Republican Congress to account for that decision. And I think there's a very strong chance that we can elect a Democratic House in 2026 that will come into power and will reverse those cuts before they ever go into effect. And I feel a glimmer of hope that there are enough folks in the Senate who feel the same way about that. And the president, who certainly isn't committed to cutting the budget deficit, who will go along with restoring the cuts if we can demonstrate how wildly unpopular that is. So I think our first line is to try to make sure that those cuts never actually see the light of day and that they get reversed.
I'm sure there are probably a lot of folks who might be in this room and probably some residents of the 43rd LD who would have appreciated a commitment to the revenue that would have been required to uphold our commitment to reproductive health care before the cuts were made. That was not something that we saw from the governor at the end of last year. We did not necessarily have a compliant partner, to say the least, in our attempts to raise revenue to make it so that people wouldn't be feeling some of the cuts that we've been discussing. I also, you know, as a member who serves on the finance committee, I know that these are going to be issues that come before us. You know, it's in addition to the big betrayal bill. It is the fact that there was a reproductive healthcare clinic that closed in the 43rd LD this year. That's something that we can do something about, if not as a way of upholding our values, then I think as a way of reducing harm. So once again, I think I come back to the question of the willingness that we have, not only in our own caucus, but in the state legislature generally, to actually raising the revenue that's going to be required to fund all the things that we're talking about. The backfill is nice. It is going to be the legislature's job. And I know we're going to hear about, you know, funding measures that are hopefully going to do just that when we get back into session, whenever that might be. But I would say that we have a lot that we need to be doing locally to fight austerity measures at the same time that we are fighting authoritarianism federally. There's a lot that we have to do to get our own house in order and make it so that some of the corporate lobbyists that are spending a lot of money influencing our legislative outcomes don't continue to see their point of view prevail here the same way that they're seeing it prevail in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I want to two things. One, underscore the enormity of the cuts just in Medicaid. So the estimates for Washington State is that over 250,000 people will lose their Apple Health coverage, and another 150,000 will lose their individual plans, their Obamacare plans from the health plan, the health benefit exchange. Over 400,000 people are estimated to lose coverage. And so this is an enormous, enormous challenge for us to tackle. And related to those cuts, it totally destabilizes the healthcare delivery system. The University of Washington system here in the 43rd is particularly at risk. They estimate they'll lose $365 million, the majority of that at Harborview. And our rural hospitals, which I just got a report today about distressed rural hospitals, many of them are going to be at risk of closure. So this is a challenge. And I think a thing that the Republicans in the Congress are not talking about is when health systems see a cut in Medicaid, then they are negotiating for higher commercial rates, which means that all of our insurance premiums are going to go up. This is wildly bad for all Americans. So I agree. And I know I was at the press conference with the governor and Congresswoman Jayapal at Planned Parenthood about being the backstop on that. Thankfully, there's a temporary injunction against that element of the federal bill. But we are going to really have to grapple in the legislature about how we protect people's healthcare and come up with, I think, a lot of creative ideas about the way we can do that. We changed a lot of our approach to healthcare after the Affordable Care Act passed and was implemented in earnest starting really in 2014. This bill is a total rollback of the Affordable Care Act in many senses. It is incredibly bad for the American people. And so we'll have to really think if some of these provisions go into effect in 27, 28, 29, and 30 about how we approach healthcare. We trend way better than most states. We have much lower uninsured rates than the average in the United States. And we saw a really big drop in uninsured rates. We were at 14% uninsured before the Affordable Care Act, and it immediately dropped down. We are likely to see our uninsured rates go back up to double-digit percentages if this bill is really gonna go be fully implemented. So the step one is try to roll back some of that at the federal level. Step two is to really think, to really be creative in the legislature, and that's going to take more progressive revenue. Thankfully, we have some really great ideas that we have been working on for several years. And in fact, the Senate on the last day of session passed to the House the wealth tax bill, meaning it sits in Senate rules. It's ready to come back, maybe on day one of legislative session. We'll see how it goes for us to consider. But I think we're going to have to be creative, and it's going to take resources to do that.
Let's hear it for all of our 43rd electeds, Representative Nicole Macri, Representative Sean Scott, and Senate Majority Leader Jamie Peterson. Thank you all for coming and for answering questions. Few quick final announcements before we wrap up. First up, we're going to put the QR code up there. If you enjoyed this experience and you would like the 43rd to host more in-person opportunities, please consider donating like $5. Because we would like to continue to do in-person things, but we need a little bit more money to make that happen. A couple other quick announcements. As you exit through the lobby, you will see some handouts from our endorsed candidates there. We are not allowed to give you handouts from the candidates, but if you choose to pick them up on your way out and distribute them however you would like to distribute them, that is perfectly okay. So they're there, but what we can distribute to you are these wonderful posters with our endorsed candidates on them. So please feel free to grab these, put them up, share them with your friends, give them to your neighbors, however you would like to utilize them, so we can get the word out and remind people that ballots are coming out on Thursday and they are due August 5th. Opportunity to support endorsed candidates. We have a canvassing event coming up this Sunday, July 20th, and following Saturday, July 26th. We're also going to have a few more that we'll get on the calendar for the later weeks. Every Wednesday, you'll be getting an email from us with canvassing opportunities, including the ones that we're co-hosting. So if you can show up to them, please show up. This is how we make our endorsements mean something more than like our cool icon on, their flyer. We want our endorsements to actually have the people power of us showing up and knocking on doors, because that is what makes them meaningful. We are not going to have, as another reminder, not going to have our August meeting, but instead we'll have an August barbecue. That'll be on August 23rd. The RSVP for that will be coming out soon. In addition, August 12th will be our next monthly social, so keep an eye out for that. I'm still picking a location. If anyone's got ideas on different cool places to hang out in, I think we need to do Belltown, U District, Wallingford, Fremont. We're really trying to spread them across the LD to force me to go to all parts of the LD, but also to encourage all of us to go and explore our LD together, and to make it easier for everyone to have an opportunity for at least one of them. So if you've got any good ideas on places, send me an email, because I'm keeping a list of them. The QR code's right up there if you can donate. And then finally, if you are having a great time and want to keep it going, we're going to have a meeting after the meeting. That name is, we're still working on that, but a meeting after the meeting at Linda's for anyone who would like to come out and continue to chat for a little bit more this evening. With that, I will call our meeting to a close. Thank you all again for coming out and hope to see you at the barbecue.